Here's what he had to say after the match. Very interesting. Quote, "When we create 10 opportunities to score and we score one, I'm disappointed because I want us to score more goals. And on top of that, if we allow any shots to goal, I'm not going to be happy, and I thought that tonight they had a couple of good opportunities to score. We're going to look into it. We're going to look into a little bit deeper why that happened." Well, never disappointment here on ESPN FC when we're joined by World Cup and Olympic champion Julie Foudy. But Julie, I got to ask, do you share in Vlatko Andonovski's disappointment, not necessarily at the result, but at the performance last night?
Yeah, it was not your typical U.S. dominant performance. However, I will say we're so used to, as you know, Sebastian, very well, the U.S. dominating everyone and taking over games and looking sharp, even in the middle of a global pandemic, that it was a bit shocking to see that collectively, as a group, they just seemed off. They seemed flat. They didn't seem their normal self. So I can understand Vlatko Andonovski's concern. However, I do think we haven't seen this yet. Given a global pandemic, it's not entirely surprising. It's just atypical.
So a couple key pieces missing. We got to acknowledge that. Tobin Heath, Sam Mewis among them. We probably didn't get a look at Vlatko's maybe preferred starting 11 in this match. But what it means is we got to look at some bubble players. Did any of those players on the bubble, keeping in mind there are only 18 spots on the Olympic roster, help their case for Tokyo?
No,
Really?
They did not. I really didn't see any performances. And again, it wasn't just one player or two players off a bit. I mean, collectively, that was just not a good performance by the United States. It was sloppier than we typically see. They were step off with things. And so I couldn't point to one player and say, she made her case for why she gets into that 18. Having said that, again, you have some young players in that mix, like a Catarina Macario, who in her first two outings against Colombia, mind you, Colombia is a different team than Canada, and Canada was much stronger, showed very well. So it's not to say that it knocked her out of the bubble, but it's just not a case where I saw anyone really make a case for, okay, this is why I'm deserving to get into the 18.
The U.S. were missing some players last night. Canada were missing some players as well. An interesting quote in the aftermath of this game from their captain, Desiree Scott, who said she thought the U.S. underestimated Canada. Do you think this Canadian team is starting to close the gap on the U.S., Julie?
Absolutely, but that's not a surprise. And I honestly don't think the U.S. underestimates them. I think that the United States has come to understand, and mind you, the statistics are skewed because the U.S. has only lost 3 games in 61 to Canada. However, in the last 15 games, the statistic that jumps out at me is 5 of those games have been 1-goal games, and 3 of them have been ties. And when you look back at some of the biggest games in U.S.-Canada history, at the World Cups or Olympics, I mean, I go back to the Olympic game, U.S. winning 4-3. It's something that still is an all-time classic. So this is a rivalry that has gotten much closer, and the U.S. knows it. I think, though, the surprise is missing 7 players, many of their stars. Lyon, PSG didn't release their club players. You thought this would be a younger Canadian team and that the U.S. would be able to pounce on them a little bit more. And I think that was the surprising part, missing all their stars.
All right, Julie, let's talk about Carli Lloyd. She gets a start last night, plays 64 minutes, but doesn't find the back of the net. So I went back over the last couple years. Of course, there's a huge break because of the pandemic. She scored just once in the SheBelieves Cup last year, just once in Olympic qualifying last year. Yet every time you and I talk to Vlatko Andonovski before we do a broadcast or anything, he talks about all the other things that Carli Lloyd does. My question to you is, if she doesn't start scoring, can she still make this team for Tokyo just because of the other stuff, or does she need to start putting the ball in the back of the net?
She needs to start putting the ball in the back of the net. I mean, when you have the depth of roster at that frontline position that the United States has, you can't afford to bring someone that's giving you a lot of defensive work but not putting the ball in the back of the net. So I think she absolutely has to start scoring. But what he does point out is that he loves, as you were saying, Sebastian, he loves the defensive work that she brings. He loves that she triggers their press. He loves that she's giving them runs all the time, getting herself in good positions. I mean, the good news for Carli is she's getting herself into the right position. The bad news for Carli is, and in another atypical fashion, she's not finishing them like we're accustomed to seeing her do. So I think that's coming. But if she continues with that, that's a cause for concern for sure.
Julie, let's look ahead. Next up for the U.S., Brazil on Sunday. What can we expect from this game?
Well, this Brazilian team, as we know, is Marta's in the tail of her career. They still have some very good, talented players in Adebinha and Adriana, and Cristiane is still even in that mix. Beatrice is another forward. But the big X factor in all of this, in my opinion, is Pia Sundhage. Everyone knows Pia from her time with the United States team, and before that with Sweden. And so we've seen what she can do to teams. Can she take a talented team that's at the end of their run? I think really their golden years were a decade ago when Marta was younger. Can she take a team that still has some talent left and organize them to the point, keeping them creative, but to the point where they could actually win a world championship? That's something that Brazil has never done. They've never won a World Cup or an Olympics. And given you have the best player in Marta for about a decade, it's astonishing that they haven't. Can she be the X factor? I think it's a little bit too little too late. We'll see, though, against this U.S. team and where they stand.
All right, Julie, thank you very much. As always, plenty more SheBelieves Cup action still to come. Standings look like this as we head into the second day of games. Brazil and U.S. lead the way. Brazil after their 4-1 victory over Argentina in the opener.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.